This Friday night we had a disturbance, a violent attack on security at the jail. The sheriff himself was attacked. I know he was because I've seen the pictures. He shared them with me. So the sheriff was physically attacked, and I reached right out to him, and so he's going to be joining us here now. Good morning, Sheriff Hodgson, sir. How you doing?
Doing good, Chris. How are you?
I'm fine, and I'm glad to hear you're fine. That was one hell of a bruise you have on your arm.
Yeah, well, chairs will do that.
Right. But, chairs are meant for sitting, not throwing, right, Sheriff?
Well, exactly. And to your point, these are the people these are the individuals, and you saw the damage that they did to our facility and to the taxpayers' property that these judges want to let out. These are the kind of people. I mean, you spoke of one person who's a convicted bomber out of another country. You got another guy who is a well-known con man who's been really the ringleader up there, and we've got tapes from phone calls with religious people on the outside, one of which was trying to smuggle information through an attorney, inside the facility, getting articles in. And this has been an orchestrated campaign by these activist lawyers who are pro-illegal, have been encouraging this kind of behavior, feeding fuel. The religious groups are sending money into these guys' accounts. We have some of the taped phone calls of them, talking about the whole sort of campaign. And what's real interesting is some of these, and this is really important to point out. These judges that are letting these people out don't have any understanding of what that does inside a prison setting and to our delicate environment here. In this particular wing where this incident happened, there's a number of them that have not been released or were denied release by the judge. So what do? They create a whole new situation to try to find a way to get back before the judge and say, oh, it's even worse, you really need to give me another chance to be heard. And thus, on Friday, we had 10, get this, in one day, we had 10. Now, we have no COVID-19 cases here in any of our detention, ICE detention. So
among the inmates, right? Yeah.
Right. So what happens is the 10 individuals, of course, the ringleaders are part of it, indicate right around the same time during that day, Friday, that they don't feel well. Our medical team comes in, as is required by CDC protocols and our protocols, and interviews each one of them. Each one of them identified at least 2 symptoms that are common with COVID-19. They were told, look, according to CDC regulations and policies, we have to take you down to our medical unit in the main building, and you have to be tested. We have to determine if, in fact, you have it. So they told the medical people, well, we're not going down there to get tested. The argument they've used, and that now we've seen these attorneys use, which who knows which one gave which the ideas, is that we were worried about cross-contamination. Now, first of all, the listeners and the people of the country, I think, probably know this. The results of a test don't come back for at least 72 hours. So even if you took the test up, do you think we're going to leave you there for 72 hours and you're worried about cross-contamination? You're not worried about cross-contamination for the other people in that unit that aren't part of your 10, right? So what that really leads to, and we're going to find out when the results come back, but my guess is they thought that by doing this and saying that they got tested, that then the attorneys could go back to the court, see we have a problem, and try to elevate it and see we have a problem. They just tested 10 in the ICE building, trying to get these guys back before the court to get the judge to release them. This is all a game, and it's not a game, but it is a game to these people, and they have no regard for the safety of my staff and the protection of the environment in here, and they ought to be ashamed of themselves. And if we can find a way where we've seen any attorneys coaching these guys, we're going to charge them.
We're speaking with Sheriff Tom Hodgson, Sheriff of Bristol County. Sheriff, so as this is a pending investigation, obviously you're limited in some of the things you can say. I'll come to this conclusion pretty quick, though. So to understand the facts, 10 people all decided they had COVID-19 symptoms, which are readily available to be found. You can find that information to what those symptoms are. And then 10 of them all basically around the same time decided they all had COVID-19. Then all 10 decided they also were not going to be tested. So, and this all happened on the revolutionary holiday of May Day. I'm gonna call BS here. I think it was an entire setup. I think the whole thing was done purposefully to cause a situation, to cause that riot. They were looking for any excuse to rise up. I mean, no way 10 people all have the same conclusions and symptoms and then decide they're all not going to get medical attention. That's obviously was set up in advance. That's my opinion.
And so I got a call when I was on my way home that they were refusing to go. And I said, "What's happening?" Well, the officer was trying to convince them. I said, "Okay, I'll come back up." I came back in, went around, said, "Okay, guys, I've spoken to this group before. I know their game. I've watched them play it. We know exactly what's going on." But anyway, so I gather around, guys. I understand 10 of you in here have indicated that you have at least 2 symptoms of the medical people said you indicated you have at least 2 symptoms of COVID-19. So, but you're deciding you don't want to get tested. So, the problem is that there are other people in this unit besides you 10, and we can't take the chance. We need to take you down to the medical unit down below. The officers are here to escort you and get you tested. So they said, "Well, we're not going to go. We don't think we should have to go down there. We don't want cross contamination and all this nonsense." I said, "Look, you don't have a choice, but you have a choice to go voluntarily. If you choose not to go voluntarily, we're going to have to take you down ourselves. But my recommendation would be just comply with what you're supposed to do. And if you don't, and we have to forcibly take you down there, then you're going to be faced with you'll end up in isolation, and you will get discipline reports on top of having to just have gone down and get the test." "Nope, not going." I said, "Read the 10 names." They read the 10 names. "Nope." Read the 10 names again. "Nope, not going." Nobody stood up. And meanwhile, when they were reading the second set of names, the guy you spoke about, the Italian guy, who's the ringleader, he's always on the phone talking to, spewing lies out there to try to get some traction. So he was down on the phone, and so I walked down and I said, I called him by his name. Said, "You need to hang the phone up. Your name's been called, and you have to go down." But he pulled the phone in. I said, "You need to hang up the phone. You've been notified. So let's go." And he refused. He pulled the phone away. When I went to grab the phone, he put the phone as close as he could to his mouth and started yelling, like screaming, "Don't you put your..." Now, I had another officer standing right there. "Don't you put your hands on me. You don't touch me. You don't..." And obviously for the benefit of the person on the other phone, it was all fake. But he tried to create it. When he yelled that, all the detainees came running down, and that's when all hell broke loose. Guy took a chair, hit me with it, threw a chair at me and hit me. Then the officer standing next to me kind of grabbed me. We actually backed out our staff that were in there, and once we got out the door, they barricaded the door. They trashed the sinks. They tore the mirrors off the walls. They pulled the dryers out of the wall, barricaded them in the door. They broke the TVs, trashed the officer station, destroyed the computers. Listen, imagine, forget this place where we're talking about this wing. Imagine in the inside, in a unit, like when Aaron Hernandez was here or somebody else, and they did some infraction, right? And the officer walked over and told them, "You need to do whatever they're supposed to do." And they refuse. And they do it again, and they refuse. And then all of a sudden, all the people in that unit start attacking the officers, right? That doesn't happen, right?
No.
But this did. And it really begs the question of whether or not it was orchestrated and planned. And we know there's been a lot of plotting going on between the two guys who are the real instigators are back and forth. One hands the phone off to the other, talking to these religious people, and they spew out. They'll say there's no soap here. We're seeing this in California too. Sheriffs at California that have detention centers, they're saying the exact same things. Oh, there's no soap here, which are lies. But the attorneys take their word for it, go into court, say, Your Honor, my client told me that there's no soap in there, and the conditions are awful. Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
I opened that building in 2007, the detention facility for ICE. I've never had a problem in that building until this last month with this group and these attorneys and these activist groups who've been coming up here, blocking our driveway, driving in caravans back and forth, yelling, let all the ICE inmate detainees out. This is what goes on. And these people are putting my officers and our medical staff and everyone else at risk because they suggest to these people that they really should be out and that they're really being mistreated, And so this is really and if I could just jump to something else, I don't know how we're doing on
sure.
time.
Well, why don't we do this, Sheriff? Why don't we just we're up against a quick break.
Sure.
If you can hang with us, which I appreciate it.
I'll hang on till as long as you want.
Sure, great. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be back with more with Sheriff Tom Hodgson of Bristol County. And we have Sheriff Tom Hodgson joining us. He's a sheriff of Bristol County. And the sheriff has a facility out at his jail in Dartmouth that holds federal detainees for ICE. And those they went on a riot this weekend because they're going to do what they want to do, and to include, going after staff members, to include the sheriff. The sheriff was hit with a chair thrown by one of these inmates, and it's probably one of the biggest stories going in the country right now. These inmates who are trying any way they can to escape the justice system. Welcome back, Sheriff.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Chris. I was saying before break, one of the things that was terribly troubling to me was the immediate response from Representative Congressman Kennedy, tweeting out that night with no regard for my staff, no question, just concern over these detainees. Said he spoke to local authorities, said he spoke to advocates, and never once picked up the phone to ask me one question about what happened, what's going on. Didn't want to know because it didn't fit into his what I believe was a political agenda. Then we have yesterday Senator Warren, which I guess she's back in Massachusetts finally, and Senator Markey, and again Joe Kennedy signing a letter saying they want a full investigation and immediate, as though we have done something wrong. The way that they approach these things, first of all, they know we have to do an investigation. We always do, right? But this was a way to jump into something to try to, use it for their political gain. But that leads me to the real underlying point that I think listeners really ought to understand, and I think probably most would agree. If there's any investigation that needs to be done, and I hope the people of this country will jump on board with this, we need to investigate Representative Kennedy, Senator Warren, Senator Markey, and all of the rest down in Washington who have for over 20 years encouraged these illegal aliens to come into this country, and then when they get here, support all these policies like sanctuaries and everything else to protect them while they continue to violate the rights of innocent Americans. And these same people, Elizabeth Warren and these others, have turned their backs on the angel moms and dads and families who lost their loved ones. They have turned their backs on the families of this country who have lost their children to drug overdoses because the drugs pouring in over the border. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. And what really the investigation should involve is that they have knowingly passed a law in that institution. And instead of, if they don't agree with it, do their job and go to Washington and sit down and legislate a new law if they don't like the existing one, but instead have chosen to encourage people to violate it. And while they're doing that, they're demonizing. They're demonizing America's sheriffs. They're demonizing ICE. They're demonizing our law enforcement partners in our communities when we try to enforce the very laws they put on the books. They ought to be ashamed of themselves, and they ought to be investigated. And as far as I'm concerned, that's no different than a state legislature passing a law that says you can't break into people's homes. And then suddenly the economy goes bad, and some people lose their jobs, and they don't have the means by which they otherwise would have had. And so they start breaking into people's houses. And then the legislature starts saying, well, you know what? They need money. You know, you have to let them, we can't hold them accountable, and encourage more and more people to break into people's homes. I mean, this is the lunacy of people like Elizabeth Warren and these others. And it's time. They work for us. We pay their salaries. They need to uphold the same laws that those of us who were enforcing the ones they put on the books, they need to uphold their oath. We're the ones upholding our oath, and they're defying their oath and deciding what special class of people they'll forgive of the laws that meet their political agenda. And I can tell you one thing. I'm done with it. And so are the America's sheriffs, and I think most of America. And it's time to vote these people out of office and put people in there that are going to uphold the laws. President Trump, before he took office, said, day one, I'm going to reinstate the rule of law. And he gave law enforcement back their footing. And he understood that in order for us to have a strong economy, in order for people to feel safe in this country, which is the fundamental right of government, responsibility of government, he started reinstating the rule of law. And all we've gotten is this same group trying to undermine the president who's trying to protect the citizens of our country. And you know what? It ain't okay anymore.
We're speaking with Sheriff Tom Hodgson of Bristol County. So, Sheriff, one of the, I found the congressional delegation, particularly Congressman Kennedy, really disappointing, because as I look at it, you assault an elected official, you assault corrections officers, you break up public property, and you get a letter from a congressman, right? You get the attention of two United States senators, right? I mean, that is unbelievable. That I can't imagine his grandfather, right, the former Attorney General, doing this, right? I can't imagine his grandfather, former United States Attorney General, former Senator Bobby Kennedy, going and responding to inmates like this, who had just assaulted an elected official. It's mind-boggling. It's quite immature, really, and I find it disappointing. But I want you to explain this, Sheriff, because some of my listeners have been in facilities like yours before as guests, but most people haven't. And so I want you to explain, if you could briefly, Sheriff, what the culture inside a jail is. You mentioned about someone getting their clothes washed and then getting assaulted by the other inmates because he wasn't going along with their process. And the idea that all of this is somehow voluntary is probably an illusion. Can you explain the culture of intimidation that can happen in a jail?
Well, sure. Look, we have gang members in here. We have all kinds of groups in here. But actually, the example that you gave that I spoke of not too long ago actually happened in this very same unit. These same detainees, again, in their efforts to try to get released, decide, okay, we're not going to do work. Well, that's fine. They don't have to. They volunteer to work. If they don't want to work, we have staff to do it. So that's cleaning, things like that. So anyhow, one of the detainees didn't want to go along with that. Just kind of sat on his bunk and stayed away from it and didn't want to be part of it. And so our staff have to obviously wash the clothes. The detainees were washing the clothes, but this one individual who didn't want to be part of that just asked the officer, could I get my clothes washed? So the officer took his clothes, washed them, brought them back, and gave them to the individual. Well, when they saw that the guy got his clothes washed and were brought back to him by the officer, as the officer started to walk away, they came over and the guy assaulted him for not going along with the rest of them. And then the officer removed the guy that got hurt out of the unit, obviously. And then when they went back in to get the guy who assaulted him, all those detainees in there created a front, a barricade, in front of the guy so that the officer couldn't get to him. So the officer backed out of the unit. Again, they tried to talk to them and tell them that was not appropriate. Then I came up there along with my superintendent. We went in. I spoke to them all. Said, "You're not, you guys are." They were saying, "Well, we want this, we want that," and yada yada yada. But anyway, this is what happens, and so it's anything. You start encouraging people and suggesting things that oh, you're right, you shouldn't be in there, and making excuses for them, and giving them this sense of that they're being wronged by the authorities. That's like yelling fire in a movie theater. You don't do that. And these activist groups could care less, and they could care less about my officers and their families. And you know what? Not on my watch are they going to do this. And I can tell you, if we can find anybody that we can prosecute and show that they were conspiring with these people and created this kind of a situation, we'll charge them. Because I'm not playing games. I'm done with this. I have an obligation to my staff. They do a great job here. We don't have these problems here. We are nationally accredited. We've got 100% over 2 inspections over 6 years, and back to back 100%, which is almost unheard of in the industry, by inspections by professionals from all over the country. And then you've got these people like Marlene Pollock yelling across, tell them how you took their seizure medication away and they're falling off their bugs having seizures. Just lies. And so when people do that, and then you incite the inmates, they start attacking other inmates. And you know what? There has to be some culpability for that. And if we can tie somebody into that, we will. Because this is not a game. This is about life and death in here, and anything can happen at any moment. And these people have no understanding of jails or how they operate or anything else, and they start making these generalized comments or, inferences like somehow there must be something wrong. They must be doing something wrong. I mean, think about this for a second, Chris, and I'm sure the listeners get this. Does anybody really believe that if those 10 people claimed that they had COVID-19 and the nurses talked to each one and each one identified 2 common symptoms for COVID-19, that we would leave them there for 72 hours to expose other people? I mean, everybody knows that if somebody has symptoms, you isolate, you move them, you get them away from anybody else so you don't infect them. And these guys are going to tell us how our medical operation is going to work, that they're going to undermine it? That's not going to happen, not in jail.
We're speaking with Sheriff Tom Hodgson. So, Sheriff, I've been out to your place a few times, and it reminds me of a military base. The place is clean. The grounds are manicured. Mm-hmm. The place looks like it's not somewhere I want to stay, but but it looks like a military base. I mean, you run a tight operation over there. I can also say that. I've looked into the backgrounds of some of these people that you have locked up there at your facility. These are very serious, dangerous people. The gentleman from Ireland spent 8 years in Irish prison for using a mortar to bomb a police station.
Yep.
And he's part of he was at least part of the IRA. They're very skilled at causing problems in prisons and things like that. If anybody knows the history of the IRA in jail,
yep.
These people. These are not some guy who overstayed his visa and was working in a fish house. These people are in the federal lockup for a reason, right, Sheriff?
Yeah, and we got a guy in there that's from the Mexican mafia. I mean, look, these are dangerous people, and when you got these activist groups trying to advance their socialist progressive agendas with no regard, not just for my staff, but for the other detainees and inmates in this place, they ought to be ashamed of themselves, and they ought to realize they're the ones that are causing people to get hurt in these places. They're the ones that are causing people to get sent to hospitals and people. You can get people riled up quick in a prison, and they just don't care. They're all about their agenda, and they do anything to undermine us, regardless, to think that they could move something forward and get somebody out of jail so they could go out and then victimize somebody else. And we're seeing that going on all over the country.
We're speaking with Sheriff Hodgson. Sheriff, one of the really, again, disappointing, disturbing things is the way some of the labor unions are involved in this, even though your staff, most of your staff is unionized. I mean, you have union workers being attacked by illegal aliens.
Yeah. And again, look, in some instances there are, as you know, and I think most of the listeners know, where some people from the union movement are in regards, not necessarily all the members of the union, just maybe their leadership.
Right.
I think most people want the laws to be enforced. They want people who are supposed to be in jail to remain in jail. Obviously, they were put there by judges, and we care for them. We're trained to deal with these kinds of issues like these pandemics, H1N1, SARS, HIV. We've been dealing with this stuff for years. And all of a sudden have these activist groups suggest, I've been doing this 24 years as sheriff. Do you think all of a sudden my food got bad? Do you think that the place is deplorable? You've seen it, Chris, and other people, maybe some of the listeners there have come in here. When you start driving down our driveway, you see it's well manicured. You don't see garbage cans overflowing. You don't see trash on the ground. And there's a reason for that. And that's why we get 100% accreditation, because we have high standards, the highest in the industry. And so when you walk in the front door of any of our facilities, that standard doesn't change. You don't find garbage on the floor. You don't find the floors to be filthy or dirty. You know, we serve about 24 different specialty meals here on every single mealtime. That's a lot of coordination. That's a lot of planning. There's a lot of procedures to be followed. There's classification issues. We have to figure out who can be in which unit, because there might be rival gang issues and things like that. I mean, we don't need people on the outside playing games because they have a socialist agenda and they want everybody to be out of jail. I mean, this is what it's come to. And you know what? I can tell you, America's sheriffs are rallying around one another, and we're going to stand up and keep our promise to the people that put us here, that we would do everything in our power to make sure that they're safe and that we're not releasing people out into the communities. And the other thing is, you will also hear them argue, these are just civil violations. Really? Well, guess what? The 9/11 attackers that drove those planes into the World Trade Center, a whole bunch of them that were involved in that group had, I forget how many different fake IDs, fake driver's licenses. A number of them were here on civil violations. If they were in my place right now and hadn't attacked the World Trade Centers yet, I'll bet you Elizabeth Warren and Joe Kennedy and Markey and the rest of that crowd would be trying to encourage them and protect them with these sanctuary policies and everything else, so they could continue to plot and plan until they hit those towers once and for all. And that's the kind of nonsense that we're sick and tired of. When we're coming to work every day, putting policies in place to protect our staff, to protect our communities, and have people in Congress who put the laws in place, ignoring them, violating their oath, and then demonizing us for doing our jobs to take care of the people. Like I said, they ought to be ashamed of themselves, and they ought to be investigated for not doing their jobs. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, if this is the way they're going to act, they ought to be voted right out of office. We pay you to go down and do the job. We don't pay you to sit there and try to support criminal behavior in our communities and making excuses for people that violate our laws and creating these sanctuaries and saying that's how it should be. No, it shouldn't. The laws in this country are established. You want to change them, but don't demonize us when we enforce the laws you put on the books and you don't have the courage to do what's right. You want to play politics with it. We're done.
We're speaking with Sheriff Tom Hodgson. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to hold the sheriff over. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. I'm Chris McCarthy. We have Bristol County Sheriff Tom Hodgson with us. I wrote a piece over the weekend right after this assault. It's on WBSM.com about how this attack on the sheriff is really an attack on America. You have criminal immigrants, right, illegal immigrants here in our facilities, and they attack a duly elected sheriff and his staff members because they want to do what they want to do. Folks, we cannot live, our republic cannot survive if we allow this type of behavior to continue, and it really angers me, the response by Congressman Kennedy and our senators on this matter. Sheriff, who's going to pay for the inmates? Going to get together and get a job and pay for the damages they did, or who's going to really pay for all that, Sheriff?
Well, that's the sad part of all of it. They probably don't have the money to pay for it. We'd love to get the restitution to pay for it, but likely the taxpayers will end up paying for it as usual, as has been the billions and billions that they've had to pay out for these illegals coming into the country, sponsored by members of Congress. Now, but I can assure you, we're reviewing the investigation's ongoing. They're reviewing all the tapes, all of that we have, to identify every single one of these detainees, and every one of them is going to be charged with whatever crimes we can assess to them based on their behaviors inside that unit.
Sheriff, I just want to go back to this for a second, because I just hope people understand this. Have you heard from any members of our congressional delegation about the incident personally?
Actually, Representative Kennedy reached out. I believe Saturday. I called him back. He called me back. But he was going to call me this morning again. And then as well, I think it was Saturday, Senator Warren's staff called my press person, and excuse me, is it Saturday or Sunday? I can't remember. And we have not spoken with her yet, or if that's what they were looking for. But anyway, I believe they were asking to talk to me, and then as well, I received a call from Attorney General Healy on, I believe it was Saturday. I called her back, and she called me back. Missed each other. Representative Kennedy said he didn't want to get back to me on Sunday because it was Sunday. So I expect I'll be speaking with him today. But I will be conveying with him, and if Elizabeth Warren does call me, I will also be speaking with her, and I will tell her exactly, and Representative Kennedy, exactly what the listeners heard on this call, because it's not okay for them to do what they're doing. It's not okay for them to undermine the law and then demonize ICE and all the law enforcement partners out there in the communities that are doing everything they can to collaborate and keep our citizens safe. It's not okay. And they continue to protect these individuals, suggesting that, somehow it's not such a bad thing. And like I said, think about those hijackers. Right? If they were in right now and hadn't hit the World Trade Center yet, and they were in one of our places, they'd be defending them too. So, this is why it's so dangerous, and it's why it's so shameful for members of Congress who know this is going on. No angel moms and dads have lost their loved ones. I mean, Elizabeth Warren turned her back on the angel moms and dads who went down to her office, and I was down there at the time at the Capitol, and she turned her back, wouldn't see them. Not even, you don't have to agree with them. How about just show them some sympathy or empathy?
Their child was killed by an illegal alien. I mean, how I wouldn't even understand what position she could take that would be she would disagree with them on, but she does. In fact, I will point that out, Sheriff.
How do you think they feel, Chris? How would you feel if you lost one of your children? Never a Christmas, never a wedding, never anything that's going to happen that you otherwise would have enjoyed in life because some illegal that came in the country who was encouraged by members of Congress and protected and suggested that it's not such a bad thing, that the next angel mom or dad who loses their loved one, that the message is, well, their kid didn't matter either because we're not doing anything about it for 20 years. Think about this, 20 years. You don't like the law that you put in, and for 20 years you're just going to pretend it's not there, and then tell people that it's okay to violate it and defend them and create these protections for them against the people that pay your salary and elected you to protect them. That's what we're dealing with, and that's why so many people in America are just so frustrated, and they know exactly what this president's done. He's done exactly what people want. President Trump has made promises like he did to law enforcement, gave us our footing back, and he has never yielded. But he's been attacked every single day, like they're attacking me, like they're attacking sheriffs and police chiefs and everybody else who are upholding the laws. And
the other thing, Sheriff, the other thing, and this is important for people to understand, is when you say attacking, you're talking verbally, but everything changed on Friday night when you, our elected sheriff, were attacked by an illegal alien who tried to hit you with a chair. I mean, they have moved now to the realm of physical violence. They have gone to your home, this Fang Collective. We're out of time, Sheriff, but I want you to stay safe. I know you will, and we're all behind you.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for letting us get the word out about the truth of what's going on.
All right, great.
Be safe.
You too, my friend. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.